Thank you all for coming to Public Square to talk about family-friendly workplaces and the impact on children and families. Ben, I would like to start with you because you work in a good place now, but you did not work in a great place before.
Correct.
Can you tell us about what happened?
We had a situation where my wife had an ectopic pregnancy, and I called and let them know what was going on because I had to rush her to the hospital. And 2 days later, I told them I'd be in, after she recovered, which would be about 48 hours. So on a Friday, they called me and asked me, are you coming back today or Monday, or when are you coming back? Because it's really putting a damper on the schedule.
And this is, you'd been told you had to stay with her
for
48 hours.
Yeah, I mean, I'm obligated to make sure that she's okay. She was about 4 hours from dying, so pretty intense. And so just hearing that from them without any sort of concern or really care from their voice, it really just turned me. And I seeked out another job and lucked out and got hired by a very, very good employer, a local plumbing company that is very good, awesome family values that they instill in us and in the entire company.
How has that impact? Now you have 2 kids now.
I have one child now, and another one on the way next month.
Okay, congratulations.
Yep.
So how is that different for you now that you have a family, being in a place like your current employer?
When I asked them if I can do something, my wife had to go in for a lot of ultrasounds and checkups to make sure the baby was going to be okay. And so I'd ask them, is it okay if I take off an hour or 2 hours here and there? And instead of them saying anything geared towards business or work or anything, it was, family first. You go take care of your family, you do what you need to do. And there was no hesitation in any of the manager's voices when they'd tell me that.
How long have you been there?
I've been there almost 2 years now.
Do you think you'll stay there a long time?
I will be there as long as they keep me.
Okay. You've got loyalty.
Yes, very much so.
I think that what Ben is saying is one of the critical elements of family-friendly workplaces, and why employers do decide to embrace those, to attract the best and the brightest and to retain them. There really is a new social contract, and that social contract is about quality of life.
Absolutely.
I want to turn to Flora because you work for Southwest Creations Collaborative, been there many years. They have on-site daycare, they have leave to go to your kids' schools. Tell us about how you started there and what it was like building your career and raising your kids.
I feel very lucky because when I hear his story, it's not our case. We have a daycare for 15 cents per hour, so it's $10 a week. So I have 3 daughters, and my oldest daughter was 2 years old, so she grew there, in the daycare. So for me, I think it's part, and they have success in their lives. My oldest daughter, she's already 23 years old. She's in Texas A&M. She's studying in her master in nuclear engineering. And my second daughter, she graduated this year for UNM, and she wants to be a lawyer. And the third, she's senior in Albuquerque High, and she applied for so many colleges, so we have to see.
How do you think having this kind of workplace helped build the success for your kids?
Our organization is completely different to other organizations. So we care families, we care individual person. Like in my side, individual, they support me to get my GED and my citizenship. So it's like how they support us to grow.
What was the philosophy behind making this such a friendly workplace for families while also being very successful?
Yeah, so Southwest Creation started 21 years ago as a way to give dignified employment to women. And the reason we focus on women is because it's a good strategy to alleviate poverty. We know that when women have a steady income, they invest in their children first. And so we started our programs with our childcare, and then as our children grew, so did our programs. Our family engagement and college readiness program, our adult education and employability program as well. And we did it because we have a social mission, but we also did it because it's good business. We have really good retention and a lot of loyalty. And so when things got a little iffy during the economic crash, people were really loyal and people were able to continue to give that extra push on the production line that allowed us to make it through. So the reason that our organization is successful is because we have the mission that focuses on whole families, but because we're looking at families and the realities that they live in as well.
But Erica, talk about how you guys have tried to structure the company so it's a place people want to be there, raise their families, but also succeed.
Our staff are primarily software developers, network support folks, and this is a highly competitive environment. IT resources are, highly sought after. So we want to take care of those resources. We invest in them with, great compensation, a very competitive benefits package, and other programs to really help the employee when they're engaged at work be fully, committed. But certainly, things happen in life, and we recognize that we want to support and do support the employee's total well-being, in terms of benefits that we offer, but also in terms of flexibility. Mm-hmm. If a situation or some circumstance occurs, employees want to be with their families. They need to be available and not have concern that their job is going to be in jeopardy or anything like that. So we really want to, and we do promote a lot of flexibility. It does give people, a lot of breadth in terms of doing what they need to do for their own families.
Do you think it's helped the profitability and the bottom line of the company?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Well, for many different reasons.
Mm-hmm.
People feel supported. When there is flexibility, there is, I think someone mentioned, loyalty and retention that is very important to us.
Adriana, you're with Betty's Bath and Day Spa. You have been around for a number of years, and it's been sort of a philosophy to have a place with family-friendly policies. How do you manage that when you have a smaller staff, when someone has to be out for 3 months?
We're really lucky as far as our employees go, because we are very family oriented. It allows us to almost act as a family where there is a lot of loyalty and people want to take care of each other. So if, somebody's child is sick, there might be 2 or 3 people who are like, I'm happy to take those hours, give her the day off, or she's getting sick, I don't want the front desk staff to all get sick, give me those extra hours, I'll do it. People are happy to step in. And we're also lucky enough that if we're short one person during a shift, we can still manage. We all just kind of take care of each other, and with our independent contractors, they're just as flexible and happy to take care of each other. We have very low turnover. Like Jessica mentioned, at Southwest Creations, people really don't leave. We get resumes from people who are just like, I know people don't leave Betty's, but please keep my resume on file for when somebody does.
I want to turn to Harry for a moment, because you were on a task force a few years ago at the state level that it was called Work-Life Balance Task Force. And you guys came up with some criteria when we're talking about family-friendly policies. I know there's a lot, but in general, what are we talking about?
Well, we're talking about a lot of different things that really allow people, as Jessica pointed out, to have a dignified standard of living and the ability to manage work and family. So there were a number of different sorts of criteria we were looking at. So a lot of the discussion of family-friendly workplace policies focuses on things like flexible scheduling, so the ability to telecommute or do a job share, or on things like family leave, which would include elder care, going to your kids' conferences. But the task force looked a little bit more broadly, because if we're thinking about what makes a job a family-friendly job, it really has to be a good job. So does that job, for example, offer opportunities for asset building and advancement, so that an employee who is starting at one level of the organization can get the education he or she needs to advance in that organization or perhaps somewhere else.
Like Flora got the opportunity.
Exactly. So the ability to move from one level of education to another level of education, which is also asset building for the individual. But asset building would also include things like retirement packages. So we are looking much more broadly at what makes for a family-friendly workplace. And then, of course, we've got things like benefits as well. So are there benefits for health care? Is there a wellness program? So how do we help employees and their families be happy and healthy? Because ultimately that's what makes for healthy organizations, as we've heard from a number of the people here, and a healthy society.
You know, we've seen tremendous shifts in the workforce in the last 30, 40
Right.
years. So what's your sense of how well employers in New Mexico and even nationally have sort of
Right.
adapted to that changing demographic?
There is increasingly a recognition that women are working outside the home, and there's a need for family-friendly workplace policies, particularly if you're trying to attract and retain high-skill women in your workforces. But there's other areas where I don't think we've caught up nearly as much. So thinking about what men do, for example, inside the home. It seems that we think that when women take care of children, that's parenting, but when men do it, it's babysitting. And that, I think, is a fundamental
Yeah.
problem, both in terms of how society views the role of men, but then how organizations account for the fact that men have family responsibilities as well. But in some sense, I think the big mindset that we need to move toward in organizations and society is to think about how we are responsible for each other in terms of helping all of us manage our family responsibilities and to live a truly dignified way of life.
Given that, what is the impact on families and children if someone like Ben can't be with his wife when she's going through, you know, a life-threatening procedure, or there's a child that's sick, they have to choose between getting paid or taking care of the child?
I did the first comprehensive study of the status of children and families in New Mexico, and called Kids in Crisis, New Mexico's Other Bomb. And what I learned was rapid, massive economic change had really undermined families' ability to nurture. And we, are constantly in conflict between those demands of the workplace and our demands at home. And when families are under that kind of stress, nobody gets what they need. And as a result, it's extremely difficult for families to thrive. And becoming a family-friendly workplace has a dramatic effect on retention. And retention, or the lack of retention, is one of the very high costs that employers suffer all the time. Training, retraining, and so on and so on. So it really, I learned that when I was working with people about developing family-friendly workplaces, that many of them didn't give a hoot about my mom who needed me or my children who needed me, but they did care about their bottom line. And when I was able to talk to them about all the things that they had as goals in their organization and how a family-friendly workplace would support those goals, and that they could start with low-cost, no-cost strategies to do that, amazing things happened.
Oh. And low-cost, no-cost strategies like flexible scheduling?
Flexible scheduling is a great one. We actually developed with the U.S. Forest Service the first federal family-friendly policy. And their flexibility was so flexible, you could work anytime, pretty much, that you wanted to work, but you couldn't exceed 12 hours a day. We had somebody who was a head of an organization whose administrative assistant worked from home. So if you have a mindset that says this is good for all of us, as Harry was saying, then you become very creative in what you can do. They also adopted so we always ask people, first thing to say, what is family? And the Forest Service said, whoever you love is family. And literally, you could walk into the HR office and say, I intend to raise Ben to adulthood, and he would be treated as if he was an adopted or a natural child of mine.
Pamela, we have the Family Medical Leave Act. It was a great battle to get that passed in the early 90s.
It was a great battle to get that passed. But the thing about the Family Medical Leave Act is it applies to employers who have 50 or more employees. And so as we look at small employers around the state of New Mexico, of which there are many, we want to make sure that there are family-friendly workplaces for those employees who work for smaller employers. We have asked the legislature to reconvene the Family-Friendly Workplaces Task Force, but this time to look at paid leave for individuals who are working for employers that are 4 or more employees. And so what we will be doing is looking at trying to amend the Human Rights Act in New Mexico, because we want families to be able to have time off when they are adopting children, having children, or if they're fostering children. And it doesn't matter whether they're male or female, but that helps to build very strong families.
Can I ask our employers how that would fly with you?
Well, we actually are covered by FMLA. We have.
Oh, you are? That's
We
right.
are.
Okay. But that's unpaid leave.
It is. It is up to 12 weeks of unpaid leave.
Yeah.
However, with our benefits package, we have short-term disability and long-term disability benefits. We also offer paid leave and holiday time to allow people to save for those unplanned events.
Adriana, I know you guys have put these policies in place voluntarily. What about more prescriptions, might say, from the legislature or
We would
federal
be
government?
proponents of it. We, like pretty much everybody here, really want families to be happy and healthy and have parents have that luxury of being able to be with their kids.
I want to turn to Cindy because part of family-friendly workplace dynamic is about breastfeeding and giving access to new moms to do that, either breastfeeding or pumping. Why is this important?
Here in New Mexico, over 76% of families want to breastfeed. We know that there's both short-term and long-term medical advantages of breastfeeding as well as neurodevelopmental advantages of breastfeeding. So everything from chronic disease, right, obesity, type 2 diabetes, SIDS, hypertension, heart attacks, all of these chronic illnesses can seriously be reduced, or your risk can be reduced by breastfeeding. What happens is that when moms go back to work, they find that being the best parent they can and the best employee they can be difficult when bosses don't provide the support that they need to pump at work. And you're right, the strategies that employers can put in place to support a breastfeeding mom are super simple.
Yeah, what does it take?
Flexible break time, what we've talked about here. We're not asking that moms be given extra break time to pump, but in order for a mom to maintain her milk supply, she has to pump 2 to 3 times in an 8-hour day, right? So she's going to take her 15-minute break in the morning, her lunch break midday, her afternoon break to pump, and that's what we're asking for. She also needs access to a private, clean space to pump. So pumping in the bathrooms, obviously, is not the cleanest place. None of us want to prepare our meals in the bathroom or eat our meals in the bathroom. So employers, true, right? Sometimes you have to phrase it like that to understand. Employers, if they can find an empty office space, a conference room that can be used, that those employees are allowed to pump in, those are simple strategies that they can employ.
Is that something that you all offer, Jessica?
Women that work at Southwest Creations are taking breaks and lunch with their baby and actually breastfeeding the babies directly. And that's really where our programs start, where our babies start in our programs. And we've seen, we're going to have a nuclear scientist here that started at Southwest Creations because of those types of supports that we have. But we have also had breastfeeding moms who didn't have their kids on site that did pumping at Southwest Creations as well. And it's super simple. It's really easy.
One of the things that we're looking at is what happens to a woman before the baby is born in a family-friendly workplace. So we're looking at something called Pregnancy Fairness Accommodations in the Workplace. It's House Bill 37. It's being carried by Representative Gail Chasey. And what we're asking is we're asking the legislature to please take a look at making sure that employers are offering women accommodations, particularly as they're in their 3rd trimester of pregnancy. Something as simple as a stool to sit on, an extra break time, a bottle of water to carry with them when they're out on their job. So those items are really, really important. So as we look at what happens after the child is born, we also want to look at a parent before the child is born to make sure that the parent is healthy and the child is also healthy. If we can just get those items incorporated in the legislature, we would be taking gigantic steps for women in the state of New Mexico.
You were going to say something.
Yeah, it's interesting that one of the things that we worked on was a company in town who had 6 what we called $1 million babies in their group of folks. Compromised births of some sort or another. And these were all by women who were in very static positions all day long. And so, when we looked at what was going on, again, low cost, no cost strategy, that they would actually have an additional break, but on each of the breaks, they would actually walk. They would walk the circumference of the company. And it went from 6 to 1 in 1 year with that strategy. And those are real costs to employers.
So.
One of the other things that we found with pregnancy is that women were really deferring their prenatal care because they would have to take 2 or 3 hours of time to go to a prenatal visit. And when that is delayed, then again, we run into the possibility of compromised deliveries, right? So we suggested that they give women an extra half hour at lunchtime, and that, or in the morning, and that they could then arrive at the doctor at 8 o'clock and be back in the office by 9 o'clock. But also, one of the related things is that the time off was only they were only being able to take that in 8-hour increments. You couldn't take a half hour or 2 hours. And this is a purely administrative issue, right? Something really simple. And when they reduced the amount of time that they could take to 1 half hour, then prenatal visits went through the roof, because everybody was trying to bank their hours so they could have a little vacation in the summertime with their family, right? Easy things.
There's a lot of discussion on this at the national level with President Obama. And at the state level, you've mentioned some of the legislation. Senator Candelaria has dropped a bill that would offer paid medical and family leave. Is this the kind of thing that is needed to make more workplaces family friendly?
A lot of the organizations that are represented here have very strong values that include families and the need for people to be able to manage all of their responsibilities and to have a dignified way of life. Those are the employers that probably don't need this sort of legislation. But going back to a couple of the points that were made earlier, there's a lot of employers that aren't thinking in these sorts of terms, that don't have the kinds of values embedded in the organization that would cause them to undertake these policies on their own. I think legislation is really important from that perspective, to essentially put a marker down and to say there are some basic standards, in phrasing it in terms of human rights, for example, I think is a really important way of framing the issue.
Right now, in the state of New Mexico, there are over 400,000 women who are childbearing age. So they're between the ages of 15 and 44. And so these are the people, these are the individuals in our state that we want to make sure that there are adequate protections for them when they are in the workplace. We find that 46% of the women who are in the workplace are pregnant or are planning to give birth at some point in time during the period that they are working. So yes, we do need protections for them. And the legislation that is out there, either by Senator Candelaria, being handled by Representative Gail Chasey, are all important to make sure that we have healthy families in New Mexico.
Well, we're going to continue talking about this in the next segment. We bring in some leadership folks and talk about solutions.